The first time I heard my name whispered on his podcast, I almost dropped my coffee. By the second episode, I realized he wasn't just telling America about crime, she was telling America about me. My name is Ethan Cole, 26. Ordinary. Or at least I used to be, before I became a reluctant footnote in a podcast that millions of people now stream while they wash dishes, jog, or lie awake at night clutching their phones. Before my life was cracked open and spread across Spotify and Apple Podcasts like I was just another headline. The man responsible? Adrian Hale. Yeah, that Adrian Hale. The brooding, magnetic, pain-in-the-ass host of Buried Truths. The true crime show that blew up overnight. The man with the voice low enough to crawl under your skin and the audacity to chase down corruption like he was bulletproof. When he started hinting at a final mystery, fans speculated wildly online. Some thought it was a lost case file. Some thought it was a serial killer still at large. Not a single soul guessed it was meth guy whose entire strategy in life had been invisibility. Until he knocked on my door. The sound was so ordinary. 3 raps, measured, not desperate. But it cracked me open like a gunshot. I froze in my living room, staring at the door as if it had teeth. Behind it stood the man whose podcast kept me awake at night. The man I cursed under my breath every time his smoky voice mentioned the town I'd worked so hard to leave behind. I didn't open it right away. Truth is, I thought about pretending I wasn't home. I thought about crawling out the back window. I thought about the way Adrian's voice lingered on my name like it wasn't just a clue in a story, but a wound he couldn't stop pressing. When I finally unlatched the door, I wasn't ready for how close he stood. Adrian Hale, taller in person, with shadows under his eyes and stubble tracing his jaw like he'd wrestled with sleep and lost. His leather jacket smelled like rain. His gaze sharp, relentless, landed on me as if I was the only thing keeping him alive. "Ethan," he said, voice lower than his podcast mic ever caught. "We need to talk." And just like that, the safe, invisible life I had built in New York shattered into something dangerous, electric, and unbearably intimate. I wish I could say I slammed the door in his face. But I didn't. I let him in. And that was the beginning of everything, of secrets uncoiling like snakes, of late-night arguments that tasted like confessions, of his hand brushing mine when neither of us could afford softness. I never asked to be his final secret. But maybe, deep down, I always knew that's what I was. Adrian walked straight past me into my apartment, scanning the walls like the clues he hunted might be taped up in plain sight. His presence filled the room too much, like a storm pressing against the windows. I hated it. I hated the way he made me feel like a chapter already written. "You shouldn't be here," I said, forcing steel into my voice. "Neither should you," he shot back, eyes narrowing. "But here we are." That was Adrian, always answering questions with riddles, always leaning too close, like he could see the guilt carved into my bones. He dropped his backpack on my couch and pulled out a stack of files, spilling photos across the cushions. Newspaper clippings, crime scene shots, my goddamn high school yearbook. My stomach turned. "You had no right," he cut me off. "I have every right. People are dead, Ethan. And your face keeps showing up where it shouldn't." I wanted to scream, to tell him he was wrong, to tell him he didn't know what it meant to live in that town, to grow up under the weight of a secret that could suffocate you. But instead I just stood there, shaking, while the man who weaponized his voice for the world pressed me against the truth I'd buried for years. That night stretched on forever. We argued. We circled each other like predators. Sometimes I wanted to shove him out the door. Sometimes I wanted to grab his shirt and kiss him just to shut him up. Adrian was infuriating and magnetic, and when his hand finally brushed mine as we both reached for the same file, I swear the world stilled. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. We stayed like that, suspended between lies and longing, until the city outside reminded us it still existed with the blare of a car horn. And in that silence, I realized, Adrian Hale wasn't here to ruin me. He was here to save me, even if it meant destroying everything first. Adrian didn't sleep that night. I could tell by the way he paced my apartment, restless energy radiating from him like heat. His shadow moved across my walls as if he owned the space, as if my small, quiet life had always been waiting for him to storm inside and rearrange it. I sat curled up on the couch, arms locked around my knees, watching him, hating him, needing him. At around 3 a.m., he finally stopped moving. He leaned against my kitchen counter, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me. There was something different in his gaze, nowless predator, more confession. You think I want to drag you into this? His voice was low, raw in a way I'd never heard through my headphones. You think I enjoy tearing open wounds that were never mine to begin with? I don't. But you, his jaw tightened. You're the thread, Ethan. The one that ties every piece of this together. I wanted to deny it. God, I wanted to tell him he was wrong. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew he was right. The town I grew up in wasn't just smell, it was suffocating. A place where secrets didn't vanish. They fermented. People smiled in the daylight and buried sins in the dark. And a stupid, scared kid that I was had stumbled across something I should never have seen. I thought leaving would be enough. Turns out the past doesn't stay buried. It just waits for someone with a microphone and too much curiosity to dig it back up. Why me? I finally asked, my voice cracking in the dim light. Out of everyone, why does it come down to me? Adrian studied me for a long moment. His silence was heavier than any words he could have chosen. Then he moved closer, his footsteps soft against my worn carpet. When he stopped, he was just inches from me. Because you survived, he whispered. I felt those words like a bruise blooming under my skin. Because I survived. We didn't touch that night. Not really. But the air between us pulsed with something dangerous and fragile. Every time his gaze lingered on me, I felt like he was peeling back layers I'd fought to keep hidden. And when he finally sat beside me on the couch, close enough that our knees brushed, I had to remind myself to breathe. You should go, I said, though my voice sounded hollow. His lips curved, not a smile. Exactly. But something softer, sadder. I can't. Not until this is over. The next day came too fast. I woke up to the smell of coffee, blinking against the sunlight streaming through my blinds. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed it all, the knock on the door, the accusations, the way his hand had almost touched mine. But then I heard his voice in my kitchen, low and steady, talking into his recorder. The truth hides in plain sight, he murmured, words flowing like smoke. But sometimes the truth has a heartbeat. Sometimes it's a boy who left a town that tried to bury him alive. Sometimes it's Ethan Cole. I nearly dropped the mug I was holding. Are you seriously podcasting in my kitchen? Adrian glanced over his shoulder, one eyebrow raised. It's what I do. I wanted to yell at him, to throw him out. Instead, I just shook my head and muttered, "You're insane," before sinking onto a chair. He slid a steaming mug across the table toward me. For a man who had a talent for ruining lives, he made surprisingly decent coffee. We spent the next few days trapped in a rhythm I didn't understand. Days filled with files, names, patterns on corkboards. He somehow convinced me to let him tack up in my living room. Nights filled with arguments that ended in long silences where our breaths mingled in the dark. Adrian had this way of making me furious and comforted all at once. One minute he was tearing into me, demanding answers I didn't want to give. The next, he was leaning against my kitchen counter at 2 a.m., eyes soft, voice rough as he admitted things about his past he probably hadn't told anyone. He wasn't invincible, no matter how much he pretended. And maybe that's what broke me. The realization that beneath the armor, beneath the podcast voice and the relentless pursuit of justice, he was just a man carrying his own scars. The turning point came on the fourth night. We were arguing again, no surprise there. He wanted me to tell him everything, every detail of that night back in my hometown, the night I'd locked away like it never existed. I refused. My chest was a battlefield. Every word I swallowed a landmine. You don't get it, I snapped. You don't know what it's like to live with something that could destroy you if anyone ever found out. He moved closer, anger and desperation flickering in his eyes. Then make me understand. Something inside me cracked. I slammed the file shut, shoved it against his chest, and before I could think better of it, I shouted. Because I loved him, Adrian. I loved the boy who died. And no one was ever supposed to know. The words ripped out of me like glass. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Adrian didn't speak, didn't move. His eyes searched mine, not with judgment, but with something far worse, understanding. I turned away, my body shaking. Now you know, I whispered. Congratulations. You've ruined me. I expected him to leave, to pack up his files and his recorder and walk out of my life, just like everything else that mattered ever had. Instead, he reached out, slowly, carefully. His hand brushed my arm, tentative, almost reverent. Ethan, he said softly, you're not ruined. You're human. I don't know what possessed me, but I leaned into him. For the first time in years, I let myself collapse against someone else's strength. His arms wrapped around me, steady and warm, anchoring me in a way I didn't know I needed. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. But it was enough to shift something deep inside me. Enough to remind me that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to carry this alone anymore. From that night on, things changed. Not everything. We still fought. I still resisted. He still dug too deep. But between the chaos, there were moments, tiny, fragile moments that felt like lifelines. The way his hand brushed mine when we both reached for the coffee pot. The way his gaze softened when he thought I wasn't looking. The way our silences no longer felt like walls, but like spaces where something unspoken could breathe. Adrian Hale was dangerous. But for the first time, I wasn't sure if the danger was outsider in the way my heart raced whenever he was near. And that's when the threats started. Phone calls in the middle of the night. Anonymous notes slid under my door. A car parked too long across the street. Someone knew Adrian was close to the truth, and they didn't want it getting out. Fear clawed its way back into my chest, sharper than before. But this time I wasn't facing it alone. This time, when I flinched at the sound of glass breaking in the alley behind my building, Adrian was already there, pulling me close, his voice steady in my ear. They can't touch you. Not while I'm here. I should have pushed him away. I should have told him I didn't believe him. Instead, I let myself believe just for one stolen heartbeat that maybe he was right. That night I kissed him. It wasn't planned. It wasn't neat. It was messy, desperate, and real. He was mid-sentence, voice sharp with determination, and I just couldn't listen anymore. Couldn't stand another second of pretending I didn't want him. So I grabbed his shirt, pulled him closer, and kissed him like he was both the problem and the cure. For one terrifying moment, I thought he'd pull away, that he'd remind me this was dangerous, reckless, wrong. But then his hand cupped the back of my neck, and he kissed me back with a hunger that stole the air from my lungs. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. The past didn't disappear, but for the first time in years, it didn't suffocate me either. Because for the first time, I wasn't carrying it alone. The morning after our kiss felt like standing on a cliff's edge. The sunlight spilling into my apartment should have made everything look softer, safer. But all I could think about was the way Adrian's lips had pressed against mine like he'd been holding his breath for years, and how my own body had betrayed me by wanting more. I avoided his eyes while we made coffee, afraid that if I looked at him, I'd see regret. Afraid that if I looked too long, I wouldn't be able to stop. But Adrian, he wasn't avoiding anything. He leaned against the counter, watching me with that steady, relentless gaze of his. Like he was cataloging every twitch of my fingers, every beat of silence between us. You don't get to pretend that didn't happen, he said finally, voice low but sharp enough to slice through the room. I gripped the mug tighter. I'm not pretending. I swallowed hard. I'm surviving. He moved closer, closing the space between us until I could feel the warmth radiating off him. Surviving isn't living, Ethan. And you deserve more than just surviving. It would have been easier if he had pulled away. If he'd treated the kiss like a mistake, something we could both shove into the corner of our memories and never touch again. But that wasn't Adrian. He wasn't built for half-truths or silence. He was built for confrontation, for digging until the bones of a story lay bare. And now he was digging into me. The threats didn't stop. If anything, they escalated. One night, we came home to find my front door unlocked, though I knew I'd bolted it. Papers were scattered across the floor. Nothing stolen, but everything touched. Violated. Adrian's jaw clenched as he surveyed the mess. They're trying to scare us. It's working, I admitted, my voice shaking. He turned to me, eyes blazing with something fierce. Good. Fear means we're close. Fear means they know we're a threat. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask how he could be so calm when my chest felt like it was caving in. But before I could, he crossed the room and took my hands in his. His touch was steady, grounding. They want you silent, he said softly. But I need you loud. I need your story, Ethan. All of it. Or we can't stop this. I hated him for being right. That night I told him. Not all at once. The words came out in fragments. Broken pieces of a night I'd buried so deep it still burned in my dreams. His name was Caleb. He'd been my best friend. My secret. My everything in a town that would never forgive us for what we were. We were reckless that summer. Sneaking out to the river. Holding hands in the dark. Whispering futures that felt impossible but tasted so real. And then was gone. Dead. The town called it an accident. I knew better. I'd seen something. Something that made my blood run cold. Something that tied powerful people to his death. But I'd been 17. Scared. Powerless. So I ran. And for years I told myself that was enough. That leaving was survival. That burying the truth would let me keep breathing. By the time I finished, I was shaking. My face wet with tears I hadn't realized were falling. Adrian sat in silence, listening like the world had narrowed to nothing but my voice. When I finally choked out the last detail, he reached for me, pulled me against his chest. His heart was steady under my ear, his hand warm on the back of my head. You didn't kill him, Adrian murmured. You were just a boy in love. I broke then, completely, because hearing it out loud, hearing someone else say it felt like forgiveness I'd never thought I'd earn. We fell into something after that. Not love, not yet, but something raw and undeniable. The nights grew shorter, filled with whispered conversations and touches that lingered too long to be accidental. The days burned brighter, even with the shadow of danger pressing closer. Adrian recorded everything. My story, my memories, the pieces I'd hidden in the dark. He pieced them together with the skill of a surgeon, carving a narrative sharp enough to cut through the lies that had protected the guilty for so long. But the closer we got, the more dangerous it became. One evening, we returned from a grocery run to find a brick through my window, glass everywhere, a note tied to the stone, scrawled in ink that bled from the rain. Stop, or next time it's not just glass. My hands shook as I read it. Adrian took the note from me, jaw tight, eyes colder than I'd ever seen them. They're scared, he said again, but this time his voice wasn't triumphant. It was dangerous, and when he pulled me into his arms, it wasn't just to comfort me. It was to shield me. The line between protection and intimacy blurred fast. One night, after too many hours staring at evidence boards and too many cups of coffee, I found myself leaning against him on the couch. His arm slipped around me without hesitation, pulling me close like it was the most natural thing in the world. I should have pulled away. I should have reminded us both that this was temporary, that once the story broke, he'd leave. But when his lips brushed my temple, soft and lingering, I didn't move. Adrian, I whispered, half warning, half plea. He tilted my chin up, his eyes searching mine. Tell me to stop and I will. But I didn't, because I couldn't. The kiss that followed wasn't desperate like the first. It was slow, tender, almost reverent, like he was memorizing me, piece by piece. And when we finally pulled apart, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, with him. But love didn't erase the danger. If anything, it sharpened it. The next morning, Adrian received an email. Anonymous. No subject line. Just a single attachment. A photo of us kissing on my couch. My blood ran cold. They're watching us, I whispered. Adrian's jaw clenched. He closed the laptop and stood, pacing the room like a caged animal. Then let them watch, he snapped. Let them see what they're up against. Adrian, he turned, his eyes blazing. Ethan, they've already taken too much from you. I won't let them take this too. And for the first time, I believed him. The threats kept coming, but so did the evidence. Every file, every lead, every whispered memory from my past was a step closer to the truth. A truth dangerous enough to put a target on both our backs. But I wasn't running anymore. Not alone. Not with Adrian beside me. One night, as the city hummed outside my broken window, he leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. We're going to finish this, he whispered. And when we do, you'll be free. I turned, my heart pounding. Free for what? His eyes softened. For once, his walls were gone. For us. The night everything came crashing down didn't announce itself with sirens or screams. It was quiet, eerily quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Adrian and I had just finished recording what he swore would be the final episode. My voice shook as I told the story on air. Every word like pulling glass from an old wound. But once it was out there, Caleb's name, the cover-up, the people who had silenced me for years, I felt lighter. Terrified, but lighter. We uploaded the episode, and Adrian leaned back in his chair with a weary smile. It's done, he said, as if the universe was supposed to agree. But the universe had other plans. The first sign was the headlights outside my window. They didn't move for 20 minutes. When Adrian finally went to check, the tires screeched, and the car disappeared into the night. The second sign came at midnight. A bang on the door, hard, furious, demanding. Adrian shoved me behind him, his body tense as a bowstring. Stay here, he whispered, though we both knew I wouldn't. He opened the door to find no one there. Just another note, pinned to the wood with a knife. You should have kept your mouth shut. By the time the police arrived, too late. As always, Adrian had already packed a bag. Not just his, but mine too. We can't stay, he said, shoving clothes into a backpack. Where are we supposed to go? I asked, panic clawing at my throat. Somewhere they can't touch you. His eyes softened when they met mine. I promised you freedom. I'm not breaking that promise. We ended up in a motel on the edge of the city, the kind of place where no one asked questions as long as you paid cash. The neon sign outside buzzed like a dying heartbeat. The walls smelled of mildew, and the bed creaked if you breathed too hard. But for the first time, I felt safe. Not because the room was secure, it wasn't, but because Adrian was there. Sitting beside me on the bed, hand tangled with mine, gaze steady even when the world wasn't. You know, he murmured, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. When I started the podcast, I thought I was chasing stories, but I was chasing you. I just didn't know it yet. The confession undid me. I leaned in, kissed him, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear, no ghosts between us. Just us, raw, desperate, alive. The next morning, the episode went viral. My story, Caleb's story, our story. The internet caught fire with hashtags, demands for justice, outrage that something like this could have been buried for so long. Adrian's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Journalists, law enforcement, fans, enemies, everyone wanted a piece of him, of me. But for once, I wasn't afraid. The truth was out. And with it, the power they held over me was gone. The backlash came fast. The powerful men who'd orchestrated the cover-up tried to deny everything. But the podcast had lit a fire that couldn't be extinguished. Whistleblowers came forward. Files were leaked. Arrests were made. For the first time in years, I breathed without guilt sitting heavy on my chest. Adrian had kept his promise. He'd set me free. But freedom came with choices. He was offered a book deal, a documentary, endless opportunities to turn our pain into profit. And me? I was offered silence again, witness protection, anonymity, a chance to vanish into the shadows I'd once called home. The night we argued about it was the worst of them all. You can't keep running, Ethan, Adrian said, pacing the motel room like a caged lion. And you can't keep dragging me into the spotlight. I snapped back. I never asked for this. He froze, hurt flashing across his face. You think I did? You think I wanted to fall for you? To tie my life to someone who makes me terrified every second I might lose him? My breath caught. Then why stay? His voice broke, rough and unguarded. Because I love you, and I don't know how not to. Silence stretched between us, heavy with the truth I'd been too scared to name. Love. I crossed the room, my hands trembling as I reached for him. His breath hitched as my fingers brushed his jaw. I don't know how to do this, I admitted, voice shaking. I don't know how to be with someone without feeling like I'll ruin them. Adrian caught my hand, pressed it to his chest where his heartbeat thundered. Then let's ruin each other. Together. And just like that, the fight ended not with slammed doors or bitter silence, but with a kiss that tasted like surrender. Months later, the world was different. The trial was messy, loud, and public, but it ended with justice. Caleb's name was cleared, his death no longer just an accident, but a tragedy tied to men who thought they could bury the truth forever. Adrian's podcast became a symbol not of crime, but of courage. And me? I wasn't invisible anymore. I was Ethan Cole, the boy who survived, the man who finally stopped running. We moved into a small apartment together. Nothing fancy, just enough space for his corkboards and my books, just enough sunlight to remind us both that we'd earned it. Some nights, Adrian still recorded late, his voice filling the room as I drifted to sleep beside him. Other nights, he abandoned the microphone, choosing instead to pull me close and whisper secrets into my skin. We still fought, we still hurt, but beneath it all was something unshakable. Love. The last time I visited Caleb's grave, Adrian came with me. We stood in silence, the autumn wind sharp against our faces. I traced the letters of Caleb's name, guilt still lingering but no longer consuming. I loved him, I whispered, my voice breaking. Adrian's hand found mine. And now you love me. That doesn't erase him. It just means your heart is big enough for both. I turned, tears stinging my eyes, and kissed him there beneath the gray sky, beside the boy who had been my first love, holding tight to the man who was my last. Sometimes, when the city is quiet and the night feels too heavy, I remember that first knock on my door, how terrified I was, how angry, how much I wanted to shut him out. And sometimes, when Adrian is asleep beside me, his hand tangled in mine, I wonder what would have happened if I had. I would have missed this. I would have missed us. The truth nearly destroyed me, but it also gave me Adrian. And for that, I'd face it all again. Because in the end, he wasn't just the man who exposed crimes on a podcast. He was the man who exposed me, and loved me anyway. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.